Collective. I'm an elected director for Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and I'm on the director for DREAM, which is the DFW Harm Reduction Education Access Movement. So thank y'all for being here today. We're really excited to have this event. Our second panel is going to start now. This one is Plant Medicine Science and Policy, Comparing and Contrasting Psychedelics. And
Well, I'm super excited to be here. I'll introduce myself.
Yeah, let's start with some intros and a little bit of background about who you are, why you're here, and yeah, just a little bit about yourself.
Perfect. I'm Nick Mortillaro. I'm a chemical engineer by training. Started my career in the traditional biotech pharma space right around 2018. I kind of realized I was playing for the wrong team. Massachusetts, where I was working at the time, went full rec of legal adult use cannabis. So I jumped out of the traditional pharma industry, started a company. We got licenses for cultivation, manufacturing, distribution. Learned to operate in that space. I was the lab director and eventually the COO when we sold the company. So since then, I moved back to Texas, where I'm from. I love it here, and I'm just expanding access to the plant. Do a bunch of stuff here now with a couple different companies. Lazy Days Coffee Shops is one of the main ones. We're an Amsterdam-style coffee shop, infused coffees, smoking lounge, but also do a lot of work lobbying for pet count.
I'm Halle Tarvin. I born and raised in Texas, went to UT for undergrad. Wanted to do clinical psychology, but found it really jarring when my abnormal psych class basically just taught me to give depressed people antidepressants and anybody with anything else lithium. So I sort of made a switch to other social sciences, and in that way I'm sort of a multidisciplinary social scientist. I got a master's degree in psychological anthropology at SMU, and then a master's in medical cannabis science and therapeutics, psychopharmacology from the University of Maryland. So I just graduated there, and I'll be going on to do my PhD in the fall at SMU. Oh, and I helped facilitate the founding of an SSDP chapter about that.
Hi, my name is Ceejay Blake. I'm a licensed psychotherapist in Houston. I'm in charge of the Houston Psychedelic Society of Texas. I also founded the University of Houston Students for Sensible Drug Policy chapter. And yes, we're just a ketamine therapist currently, but hoping, when it becomes legal, that I can provide more medicines in that field. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today. Thanks, Jeannette.
Wonderful. It's so lovely to have y'all. So my first question to get the discussion started is, how do different plant medicines function medicinally? And we're focusing on cannabis and psychedelics specifically. Halle, I'll let you take the lead maybe on this.
For sure. Differently, medicinally, when it comes to cannabis, we have not just the endocannabinoid system, but also what they call the endocannabinoid dome, which includes the endocannabinoid system, your microbiome, your lipidome, which is all the fat in your body, and then microbiome being gut bacteria. And so how all three of those systems work together to ultimately create an expression of homeostasis in one's body, and there's the endocannabinoid tone, and all of these really interesting biological functions that we're learning about through cannabis research, which I think is amazing. And when it comes to psychedelics, traditionally it's a bunch of it's a play on the nervous system and all of your neurotransmitters, how they're being transported, released throughout your brain, and every psychedelic functions differently in the brain. For most of them, three specific classes of them, there's usually a through line of them being active at the 5-HT2A receptor, which is a serotonin receptor.
I think she killed it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So talking about these from a medical background, are there any key similarities or differences between how cannabis and psychedelics are used in their medical models?
Yeah, I mean, they're being treated very differently right now in the United States. So cannabis is seen a lot more as a recreational substance, right? And then, through the war on drugs, it was banned. Now it's a tightly controlled substance, but even in your state legal markets where you've got medical exemptions, doctors are not really writing a prescription. Sometimes we say that, but it's more of a recommendation, right? They are not prescribing a specific dose most of the time. They're not prescribing a specific strain or a specific ratio or profile of cannabis, right? They just say, hey, yep, your condition qualifies you for the medical program. Here's your card. Have at it. Go to a dispensary, and you kind of get the luck of the draw with the knowledge of your blood type, right? If you've got a little bit of a better doctor, they'll take you through a consultation and say, hey, you really want, for your anxiety, something that is lower in THC, higher in CBD. But it's not a prescription as we would think of it, in the traditional pharma FDA kind of route. Psychedelics, very different, right? There's many drug candidates that are going through the traditional phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials. They're doing dosage testing. They're doing large population studies, and those are for specific indications, right? So they will say this is for treatment-resistant depression. These are the specific endpoints that this study is going for, and when they get approved, they'll be for a specific medical indication diagnosed by a doctor, and you can get actual medical reimbursement for it, right? So your healthcare coverage would cover those drugs because now they're FDA approved. We've only had one cannabinoid, plant-based phytocannabinoid therapeutic approved, and that was Epidiolex by GW Pharma, but it was for very specific epilepsy indications. Everything else is just kind of treated in these strange rec and medical markets.
Do you want to talk maybe a little bit about how psychedelic is often accompanied more with traditional psychotherapy and maybe the time elements?
Sure, yeah. First to speak on what we have here already, ketamine treatment, we have those two medical models. We have the, being used in conjunction with psychotherapy, and then in a completely medical model where you're hooked up to an IV and you don't receive therapy afterwards. And so I think that, is really interesting and should probably definitely be changed. We talk a lot when these substances are going to become legal, how they should be coupled with psychotherapy, and how we've seen it be much more beneficial, as far as like preparation, integration, followed up. And so I think, if we see the model that happened in Oregon, I think they didn't have enough medical providers afterwards to deal with the influx of like the integration that was needed. So I think, I see it. We're saturated with ketamine markets as well too, which is really interesting, that they kind of, I feel like willy-nilly just giving out ketamine to anybody, and that I think, while it has one of the highest safety profiles of any pharmaceutical, is really interesting in comparison to safety factors of cannabis, and so that is not widely spread already. It's a really interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, I think another really important topic to touch on is kind of the fact that a lot of psychedelic medical models that are being brought on right now that are through trials, but also on the recreational side, underground facilitators who do, integration afterwards and things like that. That is all stealing and coming from originally indigenous practices and cultures and communities. And I think in a way it pays tribute to it. In a way it very much westernizes it. But the fact that it is commonly combined in a therapeutic setting, and because of the time commitment, especially if you're looking at things like psilocybin or MDMA or LSD, those all have a much more serious time commitment for that experience. That, what do you do with that time? Well, therapy, if it's being used for a purpose, if it's being used for a more spiritual purpose, as you see with as another aspect of indigenous communities and translating into a more Western culture in psychedelic churches. I think that has really changed the dynamic of how it has been brought in on a policy standpoint and how we're translating cannabis versus psychedelics. I think that's had effect on how it translates into bringing it into regulation of policies and then the business aspect of it. What is the end goal?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the work you do is so important, and I think it's probably obvious to all of us that that facilitation is a crucial component of the healing that comes with psychedelics. But to the traditional pharma industry, it was groundbreaking, right? That these companies that applied for these therapies at the FDA included components of the temperature in the room, the color of the room, the set and setting, right? We all know these from, traditional sources, from indigenous sources of using these psychedelics, but to the Western pharma industrial complex, it's groundbreaking that they included those components in the actual approval of the drug.
Well, COVID patented it, so they had to.
Right.
So that's going to lead me kind of to our next question is, how have you seen the political movements for these different substances evolve? Y'all have all come to the ledge for our Cannabis Lobby Day. You've done work for psychedelic lobbying, or at least seen the science side of it. How have you seen, even just as community members, how have you seen those movements evolve?
It's hard for me because I see like it's a microcosm of what's going on in the bigger picture, right? Like there's a fracturing between cannabis and psychedelic folks, and I think that is pretty ridiculous, and you'll hear like, I mean, I love this work is being pushed by veterans and stuff, but then there's a stigma with veterans to be tied to cannabis, and I think we could just be so much stronger if we did work together. And I think it was real interesting, we went, me and you were last week and some people here, we went to 535 different senators' offices, and you could tell the climate was absolutely dead. And they're like, don't talk about psychedelics, this is cannabis only, and they were like very strict about like, do not mention psychedelics in, any of these meetings, because they want to keep it so separate, which I think is beneficial and also harmful.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's the broader movement not to facilitate healing for all and to let people have a little bit more choice over their own healing and the pathways that they want to choose. And do we not all want to support people who are struggling with PTSD, especially veterans who are struggling with PTSD? But why is it that on one side there is a stigma and on the other side it hasn't? And how can we overcome that together? Remember that these are all plant medicines that at the end of the day don't need to be criminalized.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the through line is the criminalization, right? And the fact that these are plant or fungi medicines, right? But, the through line is just that, society has treated them in different ways throughout time, even though their mechanisms of action are very different, right? And maybe the regulatory structures they're going through are very different. I do think the advocates should, be pushing both, right? And be on the same side of both. To the panel that we had earlier, and to the fight that's going on in the ledge right now, I think the systems of power need us to be fractured, right? They need hemp and medical marijuana to be against each other because the votes are there, right? And it's obvious and everybody wants it. So the only way that they can win in those power structures is by fragmenting groups and then pitting them against each other. Right, and you see that I think in psychedelics and cannabis as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I really think one of the better course of actions would be to prioritize substances, try to get one in the door at a time. We have all these various state medical and recreational programs rising up, these authorities doing their own thing, people advocating for that within that space. You have localities legalizing psilocybin, Pacific Northwest, most other places. You have FDA, MDMA assessment, and I really do believe that progress would be made if everybody who is vouching for all of those three different things would sort of come together and rally behind one single cause that opens the door for the rest of these other plant medicines. They're so great for a variety of reasons.
I mean, we see even fracturing in the psychedelic community itself with the psychedelic exceptionalism and stuff. So.
Yeah, there's fracturings within each individual communities and between each other. And I think this is why it's really important to have these conversations and bring everybody together, because this is the time that we can, have these conversations, educate each other on our different expertises, and, collaborate on the strategies that are going to be the most effective. What can we learn from each other's movements, and how can we bring them together to, we just got back from DC, and the whole thing was the Week of Unity. And it really centered around, especially Last Prisoner Project and those people who have been incarcerated and paid the price for doing the groundwork to get us to where we are. All the people who have had their lives disrupted, who have been taken away from their families, who have had those families who have had their loved ones taken away from them. And then the ripple effects that it has on not being able to vote, on not being able to get an education, on not being able to get housing, all of those things, everything is interconnected, and we can divide it all we want, but until we address those whole pictures and kind of come together on that, I think we're going to stay stuck to a certain extent. And so another question is, where do you see more opportunities for collaboration, and where do you think there's room to learn from each other's movements? Where have you seen some of the most success?
I think this is a success, first off. So thank you for putting it together. We've got a lot here. We were talking about this earlier. I think it's really communication between industry groups and organizations, right? I think there's a lot of wall building, and then well, I'm a member of this, acronym organization and not this one, right? And I'm going to take care of my members in this group, and you're not a member yet, so you can't have access to those resources. And I think at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, right? Which is to have a society that allows for science-based, plant-based medicines. But I only recently learned about your organization, right? But I'm all about it, right? Like how we grew up, right? I used to live in your area, and the idea that I didn't know about it, right? Prior to moving and coming here and doing all this is crazy to me.
Yeah. No, it is wild, and right. In Houston, we only get 15 or so folks out to each event, when I'm I know the people are there though, because there's that Shane Mouse comedy tour, and there's sold out 3 nights in a row, but then they don't show up. So that in collaboration with community, and more I think y'all, saying, oh, be activists and stuff, that shit scares people. You can't they don't think that they're capable of doing that. I mean, the first time I went to legislation, it was so scary and so overwhelming. And that's another thing. They want us to feel scared to go there. They don't want us to know that, they're working for us, that's our house. And so I think that more collaborative effort with community and just normal community members, and going out to your local psychedelic society, or starting one yourself. Everybody loves smoking weed and doing drugs in this scene, right? And so just meet up with your friends, and then invite more folks out. I think that's where there can be collaboration, right? And not having to be associated with anybody, just grassroots
Coalitions, yeah. Getting all these organizations together. I know that we've talked about that. You really want all the the acronyms to come together, because at the end of the day, we've got very, very similar goals, not exactly the same.
Well, that was the Cannabis Unity Coalition that we were with, has 30 different bipartisan. It's the largest bipartisan coalition. And yeah, they were the senators were damn, we've never seen that many coalitions on one page together. And some of these coalitions are one person. Yep. But the fact that the logo is on there, and it makes that big impact. So.
And on that note, because we're going to start wrapping up, I'm going to do a little bit of shameless promotion here for Students for Sensible Drug Policy, because we're looking to, for one thing, Students for Sensible Drug Policy is the largest youth-led organization dedicated to ending the war on drugs as a whole. So we focus on the cannabis side, we focus on the psychedelic side, and we focus on the more general harm reduction side. We do it all. We bridge a lot of different organizations together, and SSDP traditionally started in school chapters at universities, and then more recently community chapters have started evolving, and we're looking to move into an ambassador model as an expansion on that with regular membership, to where anybody who is doing any sort of work in the drug policy space can represent SSDP and we can all collaborate and bring our work together. There's actually an app that just launched on International Harm Reduction the other day, SSDP Connect, which has the Hope overdose module training, which is a training on how to prevent overdoses. Opiates. It'll teach you how to use a fentanyl test strip, how to administer Narcan and save a life if somebody is overdosing. I think it's something that everybody should know, the same way people should know CPR. And if you finish that module within the SSDP Connect app, they will actually mail you for free a harm reduction kit with these supplies. So I'm going to throw that out there as a way to connect all these different communities, is get involved with SSDP. We're going to be at Psychedelic Science this summer that MAPS is putting on. We were at the Cannabis Unity Week. We do a lot of different work. We'll be at the Drug Policy Alliance conference in November. So get involved with that organization. Like let's bring all of these groups together that all care about the same causes and wanting to, at the end of the day, take care of the plants and the fungi and take care of the people, the entire community. Is there any last messages y'all have for the plant medicine and fungi medicine community before we take a break for the next panel?
Somebody, well, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. I just wanted to say that I think the biggest hill that I'll ever die on is the fact that we need medical cannabis science and therapeutics and medical psychedelic science and therapeutics to sort of rise up as a prestigious and legitimate academic field of study of science. That's something that's going to take multidisciplinary international collaboration. But it absolutely needs to happen to help legitimize this sort of, it should be its own field of medicine, because obviously we can't treat it the same as what the standard mode is of medication.
100%.
I was just going to say, yeah, every 2 minutes somebody's arrested for a marijuana charge. There's 30,000 prisoners plus in federal prison. This is not a issue that can waste any more time. So if you're here now, like, amazing, you're probably already on the forefront, but continue the work, tell your peers, tell your friends, tell your family, anybody that you can. And just thank you so much for showing up in a state like this. It's hard to do.
And if you're in the psychedelic community, expand that conversation there too, because there are also people who are serving prison and jail time for psychedelics, for mushrooms, for ceremonial purpose. I hear it happen all the time. And incarceration still does have the same effects. So if you're speaking up for these different communities, speak up for the people who've lost their voice, who've lost their vote, and remember that the last prisoner includes them too.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. We're going to take like a 5-10 minute break, a little bit shorter than last time. Olivia, our final panelist who's going to join us, is on her way back over from grabbing a quick bite to eat. So give it like 5 minutes, filter back in, and we'll get going. Okay? Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Good job.
No, I'm patient.
Maybe
we'll be quick.
Ghetto, old school radio, I guess you said.
They make it easy.
I'm gonna stop it.
We're gonna do this. And so the women who are doing the books, they can you know.
Yes.
Jack, you're going.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. For those of you here in person that don't know me, and for those of you tuning online, my name is Jack Gorsline. Investigative reporter, thank you, appreciate it. I am also the founder of Psychedelics Today America, which is in partnership, really exciting new project you'll be learning more about tomorrow with Psychedelics Today and Lucid News. But I'm joined here by 4 really phenomenal voices in the psychedelic space here in Texas. We're gonna let them introduce themselves, but for reference, this discussion is focused on psychedelic advocacy and community building below the Mason-Dixon. I myself originally hail from Richmond, Virginia, which I know a lot of Texans might say is not actually the South. I personally beg to differ, but definitely have some experience working in existing in alternate health, cannabis, psychedelic spaces in non-traditional, in more conservative, traditional communities. And I'm really fascinated by the communities that these individuals have been able to foster right here in Austin. And Houston for Ceejay. So without further ado, let them introduce themselves. Ceejay, get a start.
Hi, y'all again. I changed shirts, so you can maybe I'm a different person. But yeah, so I'm actually 5th generation Floridian, American by birth, Southern by the grace of God. I love the South. I've lived all over this country. I've traveled all over the world, and there's no place like the South. And that's why I am, stay here. I got all my homies in Colorado and California, and they're like, why do you stay in Texas? I'm like, somebody's got to be here, boots on the ground doing it. Nobody else is. Well, we are here. That's the thing, too. Obviously, right. And, we have multiple bills and legislation right now for psychedelics study in Houston. At Baylor, we're doing the psilocybin trials for PTSD veterans. And so, yeah, Texas is leading the country really on policy work and getting stuff done.
Pretty remarkable. We'll get back to that. We'll tie into a little bit of how the political advocacy fits into the community building. I think they're inherently linked, especially in an issue as inherently anti-establishment as psychedelics. I do want to shout out before we get to Olivia that Olivia is a huge part of the reason. She is the reason that we're even in this venue. For those of you who might not be attending tomorrow and Thursday, please come out to the ACT conference over at Bay Austin. We have an incredible lineup. I am lucky enough to be on the stage with some of the incredible people that Olivia and Mary Olivar have brought here to Austin this week. Olivia has a fascinating backstory herself. Would love her to dig into that. Olivia, thank you again for being here for everything, seriously.
Thank you so much. Also Southern from Florida and Ecuador, so very Southern. I was born and raised in an international religious sex cult called the Children of God, and we had communes in 120 different countries. It was also a missionary organization, that had good intentions starting out. So really mixed background. I grew up living with hundreds and hundreds of people, and so since I was very small, started recognizing patterns and personalities, and I was just really fascinated by people and what made them tick. And so I always knew I wanted to work with people in some capacity. When I was 15, I had run away from home in Guatemala, and I escaped the cult basically and started experiencing a whole other type of trauma, and eventually came back to visit after about 6 months and had a spiritual experience, my first one. And in that moment, I knew I was supposed to be of service for the rest of my life. And so since then, it's been a path of finding what that exactly meant. And then fast forward 15 years, MDMA therapy changed my life, and it put me right back on this path of purpose. And so I've been working with people for about 6 years now in the medicine facilitation world capacity, and have always really, really put a big importance on integration and the aftercare and what happens after these journeys and these experiences. And so it's been sort of my life's mission to define integration so that people can really have a good understanding and concept of what it is, and also to provide the tools to make them accessible for people. So last year launched a software platform called Tap Integration that simplifies psychedelic aftercare. So it also helps facilitators improve and deepen their relationships with their clients, and provides the tools and resources for clients to be able to integrate their experiences.
A big part of what goes into the psychedelic experience is obviously that of the guide or the facilitator. And I don't think that there is a finer advocate for high quality ethical frameworks for facilitating psychedelic experiences than Ashley Carmen. Really honored to have her here as an Austin native, but also as the founder of the Psychedelic Guide Network. Ashley, tell us a little bit about what brought you to start
Thank you so much. You're so good at prefacing us for these introductions.
Why are you the MC
Thank you
tomorrow?
for me up. I'm sorry to break your heart. I'm actually a San Francisco Bay Area native, but well, at least officially, yeah.
Citizen of the world.
Yeah, Austinite. I've been here for about 3.5, 4 years now, so I wear that proudly. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. From the San Francisco Bay Area. I specialize in addiction and recovery, and as Jack was sharing, I'm the founder of the Psychedelic Guide Network, which is a community that meets here in person in Austin, but we also have virtual circles. And we're dedicated to increasing the integrity within psychedelic facilitation. And we invite in psychedelic guides of scientific backgrounds with Native and Indigenous spiritual practitioners to diversify the space and to also bridge the facilitator network. And the purpose of our community is really to increase the integrity in psychedelic facilitation. And it requires mirrors. And so in our peer support groups, that's what we do. I love how the backgrounds were shared, the personal stories, and one of the reasons why I'm so incredibly involved in integrity and ethics is because I was raised in a family that was really void of ethics. I specialize in addiction because my father currently is and was my whole life in a methamphetamine addiction. My parents were alcoholics, so a lot of impulsivity, a lot of lack of boundaries. And so that is the fuel and the inspiration, if you will, for my greater mission of calling out for more integrity and more ethics, not just in psychedelic facilitation, but in our world. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Ceejay and I actually met. Part of how I came to find out about Justin and the Illuminating Collective is because Ceejay and I met just a few hours before sitting in on a panel that Justin spoke on in South by Southwest earlier this year. And I cover mostly the politics side of psychedelic and drug policy reform. So I've been following closely some of policy developments that are mostly focused around ibogaine and pharmaceutical research related to ibogaine here in Texas. And so to find out that not only is there a psychedelic church burgeoning right outside of Austin, but it's led by an individual who brought the entire room to tears, pretty much, with his candor and his authenticity and his vulnerability in a way that, made it very clear when I found out he'd be coming back to Austin, we had to find a way to get him here. So we scrambled to pull it together pretty much over the last 48 hours, as much of this event has, but so grateful to have you here, Justin. And just want to note that a good friend of ours, Joe Moore of Psychedelics Today, actually, Justin, you were a student of the Vital Training Program at one point, correct?
I was.
Yeah, so grateful to have you here. But yeah, your story tells itself. So
Yeah, thank you.
without further ado.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I'm a veteran. Suffered a traumatic brain injury in 2004. Went through the VA system, got hooked to opiates to help with pain, wound up jobless, living under a bridge, which led me to a suicide attempt in 2018. Didn't know any of this existed. I've lost 17 friends to suicide since 2005. I've been to far too many funerals that I ever wish to go. And I started to work with medicines, psychedelic medicines, to reconnect with myself and to heal my brain. I didn't know if it was going to work or not, to be honest, back in 2018. I was scared shitless. But what did I have to lose? My children deserved me taking that chance. And so really glad I did, which led me to 2021 to an ibogaine retreat that was held in the underground. Very unsafe, a lot of unethical things were happening there. And leaving that retreat, I made a promise that this wouldn't happen to anybody else again. And so I started the Illuminating Collective for a multi-sacrament sanctuary based outside of Austin, really dedicating my life to reshaping the mental health, personal and spiritual development landscapes. And, I didn't know any of this existed, so I want to be able to have a voice so I can reach people in rural America so that they know that there's hope. And, I do believe we have a spirituality crisis in this country. I think, losing at least 50,000 people a year, and I think that's underestimated, suicide. It's like people are lacking connection. People are lonely. And, I'm really, trying to create safe containers, not sterile conditions. And I'm really leaning into community rather than isolation.
Incredible. Definitely want to hear a little bit about some of the things in the communities that you're actively building seem to work, and what some of the challenges have been to bring a diverse coalition of partners into these communities. We're seeing in Texas right now from a political standpoint, there's a lot of bipartisan support. We also heard in our last panel that there's often a lot of discord and infighting in some of these communities, and a lot of groups that don't want to work together. But we're sitting here with 4 individuals who've managed to at least contribute to the cultivation of communities that are growing at a time where so many communities are faltering, so many people are becoming more and more divided. I guess we'll just start with Justin and work our way back. What has been, in your opinion, one of the bigger challenges in starting a church in this community in particular? I'm sure there's plenty, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in South by Southwest, you'd mentioned that it started initially as a church for first responders and veterans, correct?
That's correct.
It's now, I think, expanded a little bit beyond that.
That's correct.
Okay, so did the first responders, veterans angle help you guys get going, or was it really just this big bold idea to throw everything at the
It helped me get going. That was, church has so much stigma. I grew up, in the Catholic Church, and I was like, wow, am I going to do this? I'm going to start a church. And, that comes with such a big R religion. And for a lot of people in this country, that can be scary. But I knew that if I was serving the veteran and first responder communities, I felt very insular to the point of like, damn, are people really gonna fuck with me? Like, we're losing 22 to 44 vets a day, right, to suicide. I just want to help my friends, and so that's where I started. And as I gained confidence in my work and what we were creating, I then opened it up to all seekers. Trauma doesn't discriminate. And I have a lot of friends that didn't wear a badge or the uniform that very much need this. And so I just didn't want to farm somebody out to another organization or go out of the country. So I really wanted to be able to serve all. So.
You want to let them know about the thing? We're not, it's totally not. You're good. I just saw people looking, wanted to make sure they got handled. So appreciate that. Really, train of thought. I think we'll pivot to Ashley, because I think a really interesting thread to this right now in psychedelic care in general. There's a lot of conversations from facilitators. I myself really kind of got my big break covering grassroots advocacy events in Massachusetts for added context, and stumbled into a pretty big misconduct story. And the leading activist in Massachusetts, an individual who claimed responsibility for a number of political breakthroughs in our state, had been impersonating a former veteran and collaborator of his for like 9 months. Financial crimes, allegations of such, whole lot of worst kept secret in the community for half a decade. And I stumbled into it as somebody new to the space, just trying to cover the politics because nobody had stepped up and then really spoken up. And since then, I've spoken with over 100 different advocates across 8 states in New England, Northeast, all with a run-in with this individual. But even right now, I found out last week, he's offering certified facilitator training courses on the weekends to people who don't know, and I guess don't know how to use Google and his name. But I digress. So Ashley, building an organization that can be a stamp of approval for what ethical conduct and standards in the psychedelic guide and facilitator space looks like, that's really important right now, all times. I just would really love to get your thoughts on what some of the core pillars of PGN were when you started and how they may have evolved given the current landscape, especially as so many more people, not only in the US, but around the world, are more interested not only in consuming, but facilitating, trip sitting, being there for their loved ones who are experimenting.
appreciate that. And that's such an unfortunate situation. There's definitely not enough community accountability. There's not enough peer-to-peer support. There's not enough mentorship relationships. And at this point, I find that legalization is actually outpacing accountability. We've got a lot of movements towards legalization, a lot of training programs, a lot of modalities, which are incredibly important. But the facilitator integrity and the facilitator ethics, there's very few organizations committing themselves to these efforts. And it's actually what I believe should be the anchoring of any facilitator. Ethical anchoring is the foundation of psychedelic facilitation. Ethical anchoring is required. And so, when we started PGN, one of you kind of opened this up as talking about challenges, and I think one of the challenges in getting community into PGN is that ethics just isn't sexy. It's not IFS. It doesn't have the bells and whistles. It's not a shiny object. So it really, it becomes an afterthought. It becomes a nice to have instead of a need to have.
Wow.
It's ironic.
Yeah.
It's so ironic because safe facilitation actually occurs when a facilitator is in integrity with themselves, and when a facilitator continues to do their deeper work, and when a facilitator is put in a community cohort that can trustfully, safely reflect their blind spots. Because this work is relational, and everything happens within that relationship. And I'm now starting to understand these relationships as a relational field that is not just present when we're guiding or when we're in ceremony, but in all contexts, in all settings. We're required to have this integrity as stewards of the medicine, as representatives of spirit, as representatives of consciousness. It's absolutely required to maintain integrity, not just with your participants or your journeyers, but for the whole collective. And so what we've done over time, we were founded in 2021. The last couple of years, we're collaborating with Halle Taylor, who has a beautiful model called Inner Ethics, which is designed for peer consultation. We teach people how to engage in consultation. It's such a technical, clinical word, but it's really easy. We actually call our support groups wisdom circles, because we're not only sharing wisdom with each other about the act of guiding, but we're also sharing wisdom across lineages and multidisciplinary teams where we have licensed practitioners and spiritual, energetic, ethereal, native, indigenous practitioners. So it's become, it's in its growth stage. We're still in our infancy. I'm learning a lot, and I'm really grateful to be in service in this way to the psychedelic space.
There's a group that I'm aware of that is actively, the North Star group, I believe. They're actively trying to create a framework for psychedelic businesses and what ethical standards might look like. There's been a lot of talk in financial markets over the last decade at ESG and whether or not that was a good thing or a bad thing or a self-imposed thing that didn't really mean anything. But to see the blending of the psychedelic community, which obviously has strong ties to tech industry, new industry in today's age, really embracing the idea of getting ahead rather than playing catch up on ethics in some of these spaces, at least for me, as somebody who would, not willingly define myself as a capitalist per se, I am encouraged by that thread, at least, is that there is an effort for folks that are working in industry to incorporate a lot of what you're talking about into their business practices. There are very few emerging industries that ever get the chance because they're already consumed by outside capital. I'm not going to get into my political thoughts, but I think you know where I'm going with that. I'll leave it at that. Olivia, let's pivot to you. You grew up in one of the, probably, most stereotypical, I don't know if it's the proper word because it was certainly your experience individually, but the kind of place where you think you learn to do the opposite when you're trying to build a spiritual community. I'm sure that there were a lot of things that taught you how to build tap integration into a framework that works for you and works for people that are seeking, but I'm also sure that some of the darkest moments within your experiences actually were directly influential on that framework. How do you reckon with both sides of that, and how do you channel some of those experiences into building a framework, or at least how do you specifically into a framework that others are actively benefiting from now?
This will be preparation for my presentation tomorrow. There are so many good things I wanted to just follow up with Ashley and the beautiful things she's creating. I was in the first cohort in her living room when she first started it. And that was my first experience getting to collaborate with other facilitators and really be like witnessed in like very complex case studies. And so it's so extremely helpful. And just another point of that is, you know, what is another thing that prevents facilitators from wanting to go to these circles is the shame. You know, we as like healers and facilitators in the psychedelic space, there's like this greater expectation to be further along or healed, right? And so it's like the relationship coach or facilitator that has never been in a relationship or has been a really hard one, it carries a lot of shame. And so what is it that ultimately keeps us from wanting to be seen by our peers who can see us? You know, it's a lot of shame that we're navigating. And so really weaving in a culture of self-acceptance and acceptance of each other, but also holding each other accountable is so important to segue into where I think we went wrong and a lot of cults and organizations go wrong is that they don't have a proper checks and balances system set up of being that reflection and being able to be honest with each other when we're navigating stuff. And something I also really, really care about and is one of the main things behind ACT Conference is to create a strong network of facilitators where we can really hold each other accountable and solve big problems that are currently happening in our industry, like facilitators that just really start steering hard towards narcissism. You know, ayahuasca can really blow that balloon up really big. And so, and when there's harm being done in the community, how do we approach that without creating a cancel culture or shaming or blasting them and creating division through gossip? And so that's a really big issue that we haven't quite solved yet. And so I think as we come together as a community more and more, we can learn how to like move in the direction of compassion and love, because that's the ultimate like antidote and solve for shame. And so it's really complex. And but it feels good to be on the front lines with people that are working together to make it happen. And then in terms of integration, you know, it's a problem that we're also trying to solve for. It's hard to have the resources and the bandwidth to offer the type of long-term support that people need. On both sides, resources are limited. So it's like, how do we make those tools and resources accessible, and how can we increase our own bandwidth to hold these relationships that we're helping to catalyze towards change and transformation by being the facilitator and then moving into a different capacity of like cheerleader or community advocate and friend, and move into maybe a place that doesn't need that direct attention, but that can still really help them feel supported. Like I've been doing this for 6 years and I'm in contact with 95% of the people I've ever worked with, you know, because I have my periodic check-ins and I know where they are on their path. I know how far along they've gone, and it just keeps growing, this soul family of people who are changing, and they're changing other people's lives. So that's such a huge part of integration, and figuring out how to make it make sense for people is what we're really working on right now.
So appreciate that. I admittedly, I knew what the word integration meant, but in the context of harm reduction, I can't even tell you that I knew really much about harm reduction beyond Narcan 2 years ago. But have since become, especially getting to know some of the great folks that work with SSTP, a fierce advocate for harm reduction, especially as someone who has a complicated history. You'll learn more about that on Thursday if you attend the conference. But the integration piece, especially your brain being literally, I don't think literally on a scientific sense, but malleable or manipulable. The integration piece is really going to be, in my opinion, one of the predominant clinical and therapeutic issues that we really confront over the next decade of research. The idea that assisted therapy as a drug that the FDA could approve is a very complex thing, but we're seeing with folks who are actively working with medicine that it very much is essential to the administration of the medicine. Especially if you're using it as medicine. What you were saying a little bit about, not getting swept up in cancel culture when you were addressing harm, led me to think a lot about an analogy that Ceejay has used when we talked about some of the challenges that she's faced, really dealing with the weight of what her clients are, dealing with, what our patients are dealing with. CJ, can you talk a little bit about the sin eater analogy?
Oh.
And how that weighs on you? And honestly, like, what you as somebody who I just introduced you to Ashley today, a huge part of why I wanted them both on this panel, is because there's community here. There's resources here. There's help for somebody who's a phenomenal facilitator and is seeking that. What could you use more of to combat that sin eater mentality?
I mean, so does everybody know the concept of the sin eater, right? It was like, this dude, most people, you go and you tell your priest all your bad sins. But there was another person that was like even lower, but he was like the lowest of low, and you could go and tell him just the worst stuff possible. And that's what I feel like often as a facilitator, or as a licensed clinician, and I work with a lot of children and stuff, and people will look me right in the face like they're talking to the abuser or perpetrator, and it's like, oh, they're looking at me, and I gotta hold space and look at them in the eye, and I'm like, oh God, I'm here. But then afterwards, yeah, I mean, I don't have this. I'm in a really rural, small town where there's not many folks that look like me, and so to hear about these programs is just like, oh man, that's what I've been missing. That is like, because as an unhealed healer, like, right, I can't just turn it off yet. I've only been practicing, September will be 2 years. So it's been, and I've been 10 years on the underground of serving medicine and, doing all that. But working within a license also has its own troubles as far as, half my clients, I wish I could be like, you need mushrooms, but I can't give it to them, I'm like, there might be a place downtown, like, but that's kind of cool. So I like to work the system from the inside as well, because leading the Psychedelic Society of Texas, I'm like, just come to the event, and you could possibly get in touch with a community member of like a way to, find these things, but yeah, so I mean, that helps me. I mean, also doing the advocacy work helps me, and being in community, I think that was a huge component that was missing for me. And I was just, doing 6, 7, 8, 10 clients a day, working, 7 days a week, and I only drive a motorcycle, and that's like, was like, it's just so stressful. And so getting back into the advocacy work has been so helpful on so many levels, and it's so good for my soul. And I think that's like a crucial component to it as well.
Yeah.
But
if y'all didn't know, Ceejay is like one of the coolest people you could ever meet, by the way. I highly recommend just getting to know her story. She's awesome. But also, I've seen this in seeing, folks in our circle interact with you. Hurt people gravitate towards people who know hurt.
Yeah.
So it's easy to become the sin eater when you're willing to hear people out, when you're willing to be an empathetic human being in this world. But you also have to be, you got to set boundaries. And that's an interpersonal thing that's even beyond being a facilitator. I think we're all actively grappling. I think, honestly, boundaries might be one of the pop psychology, top 10 words of the 2020s. I think that's a good thing. Pop psychology, I digress. I do think, I had something about what Olivia had said.
Can I add that?
Yes, of course, jump right in.
It's such an act of self-care to allow yourself to be held by other space holders. And that really is the task in any one-on-one healing profession, is to remain a good enough object. Clients, patients, journeyers, participants will always project. We're always projecting all over the place, especially when we're opening ourselves up energetically and psychically with psychedelic medicine. You are 100% going to be projected onto as the object. And it requires your ongoing awareness to ensure that you're not taking on that energy. And there's a lot of energetic hygiene practices that you can do. And also to ensure that you're not engaging in that material, that transference, with your own counter transference. Because you can be with it, which is really what needs to happen. That's where the reparative work comes. The corrective emotional experience. We can just be there and still hold space and not fold, not crumble, not leave, not fight, not counteract this transference with our own counter transference. And so that is really a skill, and it's a new phrase for me, sin eater. So thanks for introducing.
Energetic hygiene is a new one for me.
Yeah, that's
That's
good
going to be
one
stuck
too,
in my
yeah.
brain all week. Ashley dropped the knowledge bomb on me on a Zoom call a couple of weeks ago. I'm gonna butcher it, but I think it was like true integrity is living your constitution in every situation or in every area of your life, something along those lines. And I just right then and there, I knew it was going to be maybe not burned word for word, but the sentiment really stuck through. Always learn something from Ashley, honestly. Justin, I want to pivot to you. You came into this space having no idea that these substances could be medicines. And I'm sure that you're interacting with a lot of veterans and first responders who are coming to this space having no preconception either. What have been some of the challenges for those that you've been able to reach? And have there been folks who come to you seeking and seen what you have to offer and maybe been even more hesitant or backed away? How might you re-engage them and bring them in?
So we worked with people for 2 months prior to ceremony. And I found that in doing that, we also bring the families alongside this 10-week program. And I found that by doing that, I think preparation is just as important as integration. That is the work. And I think there's a lot of bypassing happening. But I found that when we can work with somebody for that long, to be honest, I would work with them longer. But they're ready. They're ready. A lot of these people don't know what to do. They don't know how to eat. They don't know what to remove from their lives. People are on massive amounts of pharmaceuticals, right? So it's really, stripping everything down and cleansing not only the mind and the body, but also the spirit. And by the time they come in here, this is where, we specialize in community-based healing, right? And I think, individual, sessions will save millions of lives in this country. But I have found that when people can do this together, they can hold each other accountable, and they can champion each other. The percentage of people that succeed in changing their life is much higher. And they get to, this is why these cohort models work so well. And we realize that, man, I used to think when I had a gun in my mouth, I used to think that nobody else was having those types of experiences. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was like, no one's going to understand this. And then once I started to share my story, this guy, that woman, this guy, everybody was like, man, I've been there. I'm like, shit, we just knew that. And so I think the more that we can bring people together, we can hold accountability, and we can really heal together. It's been incredibly successful. I mean, 95%, 96% of our participants never go back on pharmaceuticals. Spirituality is one of those things that a lot of people come in not understanding. But it's going to shine a light in some of these types of experiences and ceremonies. But having the framework to understand what that is, we've learned that if we can work with them to help them understand what could happen, what may arise in the psychedelic experience, it sets them up so they don't have to fear it.
10 weeks is impressive, and I haven't heard of personally, any sessions that incorporate the family as well. I know as somebody who comes from a family where my folks are not in their mid-60s, pretty confident they'll never try psychedelic in their lives, but they're open to the idea of alternative healing pathways. I would really love if there was a loved one in their life, in my extended family there is currently, but that was seeking that they would be a part of that process. So
I'll add one more thing. So we didn't start that way, right? We've added to our programming based off of the needs of the participants, right? They're mirrors for me. So this is how this. But in the beginning, the spouses were very jealous and envious, and frustrated, and this person comes back home and they're wearing beads, and smelling of sage, and it's like, you've been shitting on me for 2 decades.
Yeah.
huge part of it.
And all of a sudden you're healed. So I've learned that if we can bring everybody together,
Yeah.
that the spouses, the silent heroes at home, the children can be a part of this. The family units can heal together, and that's truly where life can change, right?
So well said. So appreciate that perspective, and I really appreciate what you said about your members are your mirrors. You're their mirror, and you're really just providing them the services that they're in need of. I grew up, and you'll hear more about this on Thursday during my talk, but I've been in individual one-on-one talk therapy since I was 9 years old, on and off. I was overly pharmaceuticalized. My mother moved heaven and earth to get me great medical care. I was on 13 different SSRIs before I turned 15. I know that talk therapy in a group setting for men would be beneficial to me, but it is so foreign because my only experience, only exposure, even to this day, is one-on-one, that it is terrifying, admittedly. I also wanted to point out that in terms of the grouping, there is scientific evidence. There have been studies conducted on euphoric experiences at music festivals for individuals with psychedelic drugs changing their entire lives. There's a really fascinating researcher at the University of Essex, I believe, Dr. Christine Hauskeller, who does a lot of work on decolonizing psychedelics and what that looks like. And she really believes that the music festival group setting outside of the traditional, she thinks we need to dismantle clinical trials as they're designed for psychedelics. I personally agree. Go read all of her stuff. She's awesome. But yeah, I so appreciate the intent to let the operation kind of form around what the members of the community need. And then, of course, without question, bringing in the very best. I mean, you actually know each other. I'm sure that you're working with dedicated, well-intentioned and well-trained folks. So, again, really refreshing. I want to wrap up because I want to be conscious of time, and it's been a long day. One closing thought from each of you, both on where you see your work going from here, and one piece of wisdom for those of us here who might want to better understand, might want to go and foster community in our own places and spaces, and might have some questions on how to do that within ethically minded framework. Start Ceejay.
Like it's been echoed before, definitely check out Students for Sensible Drug Policy. We have a big chapter here with Psychedelics, or Psychedelic Society of Texas. The Alston chapter is huge. Look up Global Psychedelic Society. You can find a Psychedelic Society anywhere in the world. I think it's, like we said here today, I mean, the overarching theme in this conversation is power dynamics. And even within legislation, and I did want to mention that today, Ibogaine was passed in the House unanimously. Like there was 2 no's. So I mean, it's amazing. Like it might feel like backwards progress with MDMA, not being passed last year, but gosh, we're making so much progress, and it is coming, and it's strong. But just keep showing up, keep telling your friends and family, and just do the work in the community because it's here and we need you.
Join the Psychedelic Society of Texas.
Yeah.
Where do I see it going? Well, ideally, integration becomes something that is internationally recognized, accepted, understood for the importance that it is, and that the tools and resources can be as far-reaching and continuing to grow and be added on, like a Wikipedia for tools and resources for facilitators of people in the community. So that's where I'm trying to push this vision towards. I think when it comes to building community, the thing that helped me, having experienced so much of my trauma in community, was going down through the 3 phases of activation, which is 1, to know yourself, to really understand yourself and what you like, where you feel comfortable, the people that you feel close to. So really what it means to know yourself, that internal self-awareness of understanding who you are and the things that have shaped and made you, understanding that your triggers don't define you. And then external self-awareness, really leaning into understanding the impact you have on others and the way that people are experiencing you so that you can attune to them. And I think by having that complete sort of sense of self-awareness, which is a lifelong journey, you tend to relate in community so much better. And then connecting with purpose and figuring out how that works in your community. Like we're all these little modular links that are connected. And I think when you're in that place of purpose and really understanding it through self-awareness, that community just starts to naturally happen as a result.
Amazing. I do want to note that part of the future is the ACTS conference coming back next year too. So definitely come out if you're already planning. Ashley?
Let's see the future. By the year 2030, every psychedelic facilitator will be in a peer-to-peer support group or within their own mentorship relationship, whether that's through PGN or not. Community accountability is so important. And PGN has virtual circles opening next month and in-person circles as well. You know, a little nugget I'd like to leave everybody with is that community accountability actually provides way more safety in psychedelic facilitation than government oversight. And this is the paradigm shift, right? We've done oversight, we've done, you know, third-party entities, governing bodies intervening, and this psychedelic movement is about returning us to our authority, to our sovereignty, and it's the revolution. So I really do welcome a different framework instead of asking for permission to engage with nature. I really return us all to our sovereignty and our authority, to God's law.
The future, short term, we'll be starting to serve Ibogaine in ceremony, starting in July. Coming up very soon, so I'm very excited about that. Long-term 10-year plan, really see ourselves being in about 30 or 40 different cities. Really we built out our business model to be able to touch 100 cities in the U.S. So that's what we're working on right now. Piece of wisdom. Everything you ever want in your life lies on the other side of fear. I would say if I would have stayed afraid and small, we wouldn't be impacting the lives that we're impacting. If you want to go start a community, if you want to go start a church, if you want to go start something, go do it. If it's not you, then who's coming, right? And so that's what I would move away from fear into excitement and help change the world.
Thank you all so much for being here. So, I know that there's some folks gathering at the Canoa Kava Bar over in the far corner of the compound. Commune.
Dirty
yeah,
commies.
So, yeah. But thank you again all for being here. Come up to the ACT conference tomorrow. Yeah. Fantastic.
Great job.
Party. There's the guy from Boston. Hey.
Yeah.
This is the guy from Boston. Party.
That's where I got